Hey y'all, I'm Alice in Wonderland. Hopefully y'all can hear me. I was just listening to Princella, the Queen Maker. I haven't listened to her in a while because I just haven't really been on this side of YouTube. What usually happens is after a while, I will like do a video on here and then I start watching things that are within the sector and I don't know, like it's kind of interesting because it's really like an alternate universe when you step up in here. Because yeah, I know that like these topics are topics that are obviously happening in the world because they're happening online, and people that are in the world are people who are online, so, right? But at the same time, I cannot stress how much like perception shapes your reality. So when you're just not a part of all of these things, then it's like it really doesn't exist. What exists is just, whatever you're doing, the kind of people that you associate with, and the kind of people you're around. But anyway, Princella, to me, she's cool. I don't have a big problem with the things that she says. Most of my opinion about female content creators on here that say things that I guess I would consider to be misandrist is that there's just so much misogyny. Like, we really do live in a patriarchal society that has an issue with wanting to dominate and possess and control women. And patriarchy also controls men as well. Like, it's just not a good system. But, women are lower in the hierarchy, especially women of color, due to, the patriarchal social hierarchy structure. So it is what it is. Like, there's a level of misandry that I feel is called for. Just, it's just kind of like oppositional poetics or something. Like, you just need it. It's just necessary. But the type of paradigm shift that she's talking about as far as like women leaving men together all the way is interesting because the first person that I heard talking this radically was RWS hashtag exposed, otherwise known as Ms. Prophet. I think that was like her first name. When she was Ms. Prophet, though, she wasn't speaking like that. It wasn't until she became RWS hashtag exposed that she started saying like women need to leave all males alone and that males need to be disenfranchised. She definitely had like a black male slant, like an anti-black male slant, but the more that she delved into her content, she started just talking about males in general and that males were a problem. Just her being who she is, she's extremely raw, uncut, like a she's just not she's a similar content creator to me, as far as like just not being incredibly sophisticated in terms of like the presentation, but that was the first time that I really heard somebody talking in that way. So it's interesting to see Princilla now. um, I saw in the comments somebody was comparing her to like Kendall St. Charles, and I don't think so. To me, I can understand why people see the comparison from their like vantage point, but to me, they're not really equivalent. I mean, Kendall St. Charles said some very interesting things, but she also was talking heavily about when she teamed up with Pink Pill, she really got into, like getting with non-black men, that being like black women's salvation. And again, it was like very black slanted. So that's why I would say I don't really see the comparison because one thing I do find valuable about Princella's content is that she's not racially slanted. I think her being who she is, understanding that she's a black woman with a southern accent who speaks in a very black vernacular, I think she understands that she's going to fall into the black schisms on YouTube, and so she utilizes that to build her platform. But she's really not just talking to black women. She's talking to all women, and she's talking about all men. Um, Now, her being a black woman, again, it's just a matter of intersectionality that she's able to use, our lens as black people and talk to black men in this very specific way. But honestly, her message is just about like males and their nature in general. So the reason I'm bringing her up though is because like I saw the spot where she was on like Fresh and Fit's show, back when they were on. And this is not the first time this has happened. It's just, I think, probably like the latest time that this happened. I just find it so interesting how, like, whenever she talks to men about who they are, she's literally repeating the same things that men say about themselves. Like she is agreeing with them. The only thing that she is adding to it is that it's in women's best interest to leave men alone. She's like, yes, I agree that all you care about is sex and you just want to possess and dominate women. And I agree that you don't really love women. Um, and I agree that you guys are just selfish and you think about sex constantly. I agree with you. I agree with you. And so, therefore, I think because women have a little more complicated needs, then women are better off like leaving you guys alone completely. And then that's when they're like, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Men and women need each other. It's like, yeah, you definitely cannot have it both ways. And it's just like funny because it happens every time, like every single time she's talking to a male of that point of view, and she does this. They flip. They act like they just don't want a woman to say it because obviously, what's in a woman's best interest to you know preserve herself, to protect herself. So the solution would be to leave y'all alone then, right? And then like, wait a minute, you're going too far now. Like, okay, but you guys don't love. Oh, yes, we do. How dare you? You just said you don't. What do you mean? So yeah, I like as far as me personally, like it doesn't matter if I agree or disagree with like all of her points. That's that's not necessary for me, because here's the thing. Um, a lot of the people that listen to this type of content, um, a lot of them are going to stay listening to this type of content and they're not going to go too far from it. Like, I saw the comment by this woman that was comparing Princella to Kendall St. Charles, and then there were like some other people who responded to it, and they were like, building off of that comment, and all I could think was, y'all are still here. Like, I just don't believe it. Maybe I'm like on my own high horse. I don't know. But I don't think these people go on like vacations from Black YouTube. I think they've literally been here for years, deeply invested in these conversations, allowing these conversations to run their life, to shape their perspective, to shape their choices, and and yet, right? And yet you're still right here. Like, what has changed for you? And it actually makes me feel a little sad because I still don't believe that you could spend that much time invested in these conversations on like a daily basis, and yet you're going to convince me that you're divesting or that you're swirling or that you're celibate. Or I don't think so. I think you're still like way too attached. And there's something to be said about that, because detachment is actually required if you're going to manifest what it is that you truly desire. So that's why I kind of feel like this type of content is harmful, When people, if you have enough self-awareness, um, and if you have enough self-discipline, to just ingest it as an observer, then it's okay, but at some point, hopefully something will click in and you're like, okay, I've been watching this too much, or gee, I'm noticing that this is kind of making me a little bit depressed, or a little bit um, sad, or just making me change a little bit. Um, and so you pull back, or you just decide, like, okay, it's time for me to, like, go watch some videos about cats or ice skating or something. Like, I don't know how many people do that. I think people really do, like, follow, like, for real, follow these content creators. And I just can't. I I personally cannot get that invested in these conversations. Like, I mean, I'm pretty much an imposter anyway, so it's okay. It doesn't matter. I've come to terms with myself. Like, most of the time when I was more heavily making content, I was not necessarily living the life that I was talking about. And I'm okay with that. I think I was just, trying to see something, or trying on a new suit, or trying to see how something felt. But at the end of the day, what it did was kind of, brainwashing matters. It happens. It's a real thing. You can self-program. And I got very deep into hotepism. I ended up getting into a marriage with somebody that was very zealous about, like, race and religion, or self-made religions. And it definitely changed my life. Changed my life, in many ways. Some ways that were absolutely wonderful, and some ways that were absolutely horrific. Um, but even in that light, at the moments where I was trying to embrace that particular lifestyle, felt like I had a very well hidden, was that this was a different, um, brave new world for me. This wasn't really a life that I'd been truly living. It was just a life that I was living in that moment. And as soon as I decided that that was no longer beneficial for me, or um, for the people around me, then I went right back to the life I was living before that. It wasn't difficult. It was difficult for me to go through the transition of divorce, but it wasn't difficult for me to go back to the life that I always had lived before. Um, so on the other hand, I think there's, like, people that they're really looking for guidance. Like, I heard people calling into Princella's show, and it's really great to be supportive of a platform that you believe in. I'm hearing people, though, they're like saying they're on the brink of tears while they're talking to her. Like, um, this is not against her or those people. It's just like, it's really important that people, like, live their own life on their own terms. And when I used to talk, particularly black, very codependent, and just having a difficult time living on their own terms. So this is how we end up with manifestations that people will call bedwenching, or mammying, or pick meing, or things of that nature. And I mean, this to me is not that far off. Even if you're under a thought ideology that you think is right for you, it's like it. But is it yours? Is it really your thought ideology, or has it been inserted into your mind? Like, in order for you to know that, you need to take a break, and you need to not idolize another human being. But a lot of that stems, to me, in my opinion, it stems from codependency. It's like, if I don't lean on this message, if I don't lean on this good word, from the good system, Princella, then I might go back to, sucking black dick. But it's a real thing for people. Like, um, independence, like what about just being by yourself? What about just learning you? What about just cultivating a relationship with you? Maybe she implanted that original thought, but now you need to step away from the platform and invest some time just in yourself. And it sounds really woo woo, like self care, like all of that kind of stuff that you hear about on social media, but it's very hard work actually, because you need to start doing the the shadow work and the self-reflection, maybe get yourself like a therapist or a life coach, or get just meditation, prayer. I mean, all of these things are like extremely real. Like, wake up in the morning and maybe you're not uh, scrolling through apps or going through DMs or trying to see, who's trying to buy you drinks or buy you dinner or take you take you on a bootcation or buy you shoes and bags or what's the latest makeup. Like um I think about that when I see like women that literally look like everybody else. Like they look like the same exact person. And I'm not like saying that it's wrong to follow trends or to do things with your hair or your clothes or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, don't you ever stop to just be with yourself and just know who you are. Like, I remember when I used to live in Washington D.C. and I used to like date, guys from the city. And they liked me for all the reasons that a lot of black guys will like a black woman, like a very very voluptuous, big old butt, kind of whatever. But they get to know my personality, and they might like my personality as well. And eventually, because they met me as myself, eventually they're starting to want me to dress like other girls in DC, and that was not my thing. I don't want to look like I'm from the DMV. Nothing against the DMV. That's just not my style. And I feel like that's like that's a thing. Like, I feel like a lot of those guys, I mean, I see it everywhere. I see it, you know, dudes from Harlem have a certain look, dudes from Philly have a certain look. It's just like sometimes people just play like follow the leader or do like a cookie cutter type of thing instead of just being individually themselves, because they literally don't know who that person is. And a lot of the times that's survival. Like, if you ever seen that episode of Atlanta with the Fubu, it was Fubu, right? I think it was Fubu. It was like um I don't want to get into the episode, but it's very like every episode of Atlanta, it was a very important episode on a very special edition of Atlanta. But I think for some people it is about survival for sure. I mean, I know, like, for myself growing up where I did, you know, I don't want to get into it. But yeah, I basically looked like an Abercrombie and Fitch ad, and it was not cute because I was not anything looking like an Abercrombie and Fitch ad. But it was a thing that I did for survival because of the surroundings that I was in. And I mean, I brought that same style to Washington, D.C. Now, once I got to D.C., I'm like, okay, I'm going to tweak some things just so I can, again. But the longer I was there, um, the more I just got to know myself, and I started to embrace what I like and who I am, what I'm about. And then running into different men that wanted to change that and make me look like a whole other chick. It was just like, it's just interesting. Like, a lot of people a lot of people, maybe not just black people, I'm sure not just black people, because that's what trends essentially are, but people can veer really far off. Like, you ever meet those women that cannot go outside without makeup on? Like, they cannot. They're waking up like much earlier than they need to, just to put on a whole different head of hair, a whole different face. At the end of the day, they're, or they haven't get to know themselves. They're just in the mode of it's like this episode of Twilight Zone. At a certain age in people's lives, you went into this store and you pick out like what kind of person you wanted to look like. And yeah, so it's literally like that. Like, look into that episode of Twilight Zone. It's like my favorite episode, actually. Yeah, I think that's my favorite one. That one and like Mr. Death with Robert Redford. I think those are like my two favorite ones. But I mean, Twilight Zone is dope anyway. But damn, I'm almost at my destination, so I'm not gonna finish everything I had to say. But I did have to say something else about Princella. I just can't freaking remember what it was. Oh, one thing I had to say about like the concept of men in love. Like, I don't know if I agree with her necessarily, and some of it might be semantics, but I think she made some interesting points, saying that she claims that men do not love, and that the most that a male can do for the people around him is show that he cares about them, and in showing that he cares, he will do X, Y, or Z for them to show that he cares, but that he love. And I didn't buy her book, so I don't know what love are. I know what love is, as far as my understanding of it, and she could very, very well have a point there. But I think that getting care from a male, if that is what pleases you, I think that that is totally fine. Maltreatment in exchange for that. Um, but the concept that a male that does love, or that is not, possessive or dominating, or doesn't want to suck the life out of you, the idea that a male like that is an outlier, I think really actually interesting, because a lot of my arguments back in the day were always kind of surrounded around the males that I knew personally, especially my father. Um, my father's not like a perfect human being, but you know, sometimes I would feel like I was in bizarro land hearing a lot of people's social media commentaries about male behavior, because that was just not my father at all. And I always took for granted that men were like my father. And over and over and over again, I learned that a lot of these men are just not. And it was a learning experience, to say the least. But the idea, the concept, I'm not going to get into like specifics about my dad, but the concept that he could have possibly just been like an outlier, um, is something that I think I can accept. I don't want to accept that. I want to believe that no, I think men are better than that. But it's a concept that I see, and I see it in other males that I've experienced as well. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I came to the realization that everybody can't just be delusional, and everyone can't just be wrong about what they're saying, and yet I cling to these ideals about males that are all just based on my dad. Like one man. like so maybe he was an outlier, and maybe these handful of men that I use as examples are outliers as well, and they're not actually the norm. I don't know. I It's just something that I'm more aware of now than I was in the past. And I think the thing is if you are the kind of woman that may have experienced like an outlier male in your life that was of influence, whether that's like your father, your grandfather, uncles, your brother, cousins, or something like that, it will be really difficult for you in life when you're trying to select a mate or date, because a lot of these men don't navigate like that. And then they will treat you like you're crazy for having this expectation when that's literally how you were raised or how you were reared or what you were exposed to. But um, on the other hand, I do think like perhaps understanding that is very powerful, because now you can see like, are you going to accept the norm as it's presented? The norm being literally what a lot of these men articulate who they are and what they're about. Will you accept that, or will you hold out for something that you recognize? And of course, there's other options, like you could be celibate or you could be a lesbian. But I'm just throwing that out there as well, because I do think that it's possible. Now, I will say one thing that Kendall St. Charles once said. She said, "No one has time to sift through these to find a needle in the haystack, nigga," something like that. She said something like that, like the outlier, right? The concept of the needle in the haystack, the outlier male. Like, do you have time to try to find this human being, or are you patient enough to wait for that person, or are you willing to accept the norm? And maybe if you have knowledge, that can be used as a superpower. I don't know. It's just something to think about.